President of the Legislative Council. Appropriation Bill 2014. Committee stage will continue with the second joint debate. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Albert Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Well, I had an inflammation in my tooth, so it would be a little bit difficult for me to speak. And on top of that, I had a casserole for lunch, so I am a little bit sleepy now. Well, I was talking about in this Chief Executive's office about the special appointments. My conclusion was that this has dampened the morale of the civil service. These special appointments in the CE's office have got no proper mechanism, and the remuneration, duties, and other information are not clear. So I think it's a glaring example of nepotism. I have some information to share with you. Well, some people in this council or some people in the government have done this kind of things before. Mr. Chan, can you tell us what item are you talking on? Is amendment number 11, a resolution to reduce subhead 000 underhead 21 by $11.658 million, which equals to the annual budget of the special appointment under the CE's office. Well, as I said, in relation to the appointments, some of them are sitting here. These special assistants enjoy an excessively high salary. We wonder whether it's worth the money. In relation to this type of positions, there are a lot of them. Say, for example, a senior special committee. There is a position of special assistant, including the gratuity. The estimate is as high as $2.99 million. There are some other amendments. I can deal with them all now so that I don't have to repeat later. If you refer to number 24, 25, in relation to 24, it's about a reduction of the annual remuneration, including gratuity of the senior special assistant in the CE's office. The amount is $2.99 million. Item 25 is a reduction of $2.61 million, is the annual remuneration of the information coordinator of the CE's office. And I will discuss these items together with item 11. They are interrelated, and they share the same logic and justification. Let me refer to the senior special assistant. The duties are to advise the CE in relation to mainland affairs, to liaise with the central authorities, and to assist the CE in overseas exits, and to assist in studies, and to liaise with district bodies and the business sector. If you look at this position, to a certain extent, the liaison office has been doing that work and more. I believe that the CE's office liaison with the liaison office does not rely on this senior special assistant. We're spending close to $3 million a year on this. Perhaps this position is to enable the CE to frequently go to the mainland to liaise with the provinces and municipalities, and it gives the impression that he's simply forgotten about Hong Kong because he visits mainland so often, and people think that Hong Kong is no longer an international city. With so much relations and communications with the mainland, it seems that Hong Kong has detached itself from the international world. If you compare this remuneration with the Prime Minister of Japan, which enjoys only $160,000 US. Now, this senior special assistant who organizes visits and arrange meetings, we see that for the latter, it's not necessary. Currently, it's still Chen Jinping. I don't know whether the position holder has changed. This Mr. Chen Jinping. According to the information, he's a member of the Chinese Communist Party, and he worked in Wai-yip before. So he's got a special political background. Does he represent the Chinese Communist Party on the Central Committee? It's just like in the colonial days. There are some special assistants for the governor. They were put there by the UK government. Say, for example, in the Chris Patten era, you see a couple of special assistants following Patten along. Now we have this person with a rich political background, and it seems that he's working in a black hole. No one knows what he's doing. No one explains about what he's actually doing, and we cannot assess his performance and his ability to see if it's value for money. We don't really have confidence in this person. Perhaps we should ask the audit commission to do an audit on these special assistants in the CE's office to see if they are value for money. Well, otherwise, taxpayers' money will be lost and wasted. People who knew this Chen Jinping described him in this way. There is a person called Wai-yip who once described Chen Jinping. My understanding is that the appointment of Chan is related to the social network he established working as a journalist. Whether it's Donald Tsang or Tong Chi-hua, they could not coordinate using the mainland Chinese way, and Chen Jinping has the ability. And he's very apt at doing things like that. Appointing Chen Jinping as the senior special assistant will help the CE to draft his speaking notes and to reflect his political philosophy and administratively to bridge gaps for him. From his speech, you can see that it's got a very heavy touch of mainland flavor. But if that is the case, we don't need the CMAB, the Constitutional Mainland Affairs Bureau, because this person can take up a lot of work done by the Bureau. Because he will be able to provide support and assistance to various departments and bureaus. This description reflects the operation to a certain degree of the CE's office. We see that everything is done behind closed doors. What Hong Kong people should ask, or the LegCo should ask, is why there is no explanation about the specific need for the appointment. If this is not the duty of the CE's office and the appointment is a result of someone's personal preference, and that person can do whatever he wants, trampling the well-established bureaucracy, and to instill communist elements in the Hong Kong system. This is a senior position, and it's got a very strong and special political background. The appointment did not go through proper recruitment procedure. There was no accounts given, but it plays an important part. Perhaps it's got something to do with the mainlandization of Hong Kong's system, say turning the Hong Kong police force into public security, and the ICAC chief can use public money to buy briskets and wine. We see that Hong Kong has been mainlandized, privatized, and corrupted. Mr. Albert Chan, I think you are using unrelated justification, and it shows that you are now repeating yourselves. Well, I'm going to my conclusion. He's brought the mainland culture, mainland political culture into Hong Kong. He's the main culprit. As he should be taken from this position. He should not be allowed to meddle into Hong Kong's governance because he lacks Hong Kong's core values. Hence, in item number 24, I ask for this position to be scrapped. In item 25, Chairman, when you are saying that, when you're making that remark, I was going towards the end of item 24. 25 is about a reduction of $2.61 million under 000 of head 21, which equals to the annual remuneration of the information coordinator of the CE's office. I know this person. Well, when I was in the Democratic Party, I was not on good terms with this person at all. I think this person is a negative asset in any political party, and I think this is this person's got all bad bones in him. And let me tell you about the main duties of this position. Information coordinator. Well, it's not like this person said, that this position is the spokesman of the White House. The duty of the information coordinator is to formulate media strategy and liaise with the media, and to enable close contact between government officials and the media whenever a policy is to be launched. And this position also monitors the responses of the media, and also make arrangements of any duties, any visits between of the CE in relation to the media. And I will elaborate further of my justification of item 25.
Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, Chairman, I'm going to speak on amendment number 23 and 24. Number 23 is proposed by Mr. Wong Yok-man, and that is to cut subhead 000 under head 21 by the $3.4 million, which is equivalent to the annual budget for the remuneration of the CE's office director. Chairman, a leader should know how to find the right associates. I won't talk about the Executive Council anymore. I did it yesterday. We now have a director of the CE's office and also a senior special assistant. They discharge different duties. They're not doing this within the territory of the PRC. You know, Mr. Edward Yao accompanied the CE in his meeting with President Aquino, but we did not see Mr. Chen Kim-peng doing the same. So Mr. Chen is responsible for making arrangements for the CE on the mainland. So it's reasonable to have two different people doing the two jobs. But the question is who have been appointed to the post. Mr. Yao was the Secretary for the Environment, a political appointee. Was he capable as Secretary for the Environment? Well, there were at least 3 incidents on which he had failed to satisfy the people. For example, he failed to ask the Marine Department to introduce a prohibition on the use of polluting the vessel diesel within the Victoria Park. And now the ban on idling engine is a joke internationally. And the third incident is this. And again, he failed to do his duty. This is his legacy. Now Mr. Wong Kam-seng is trying to persuade people to agree to the extension of the landfills. During his term, Mr. Yao spent a lot of time on this useless initiative, the ban on idling engines, and instead he did not take action to deal with the landfills. And now you should not spend $3.4 million to appoint someone to work by your side, and he would fail you. Why should the CE appoint Mr. Yao, who is so good at the PR duties. And has Mr. Yao been doing his job since his appointment to the CE's office? Of course not. In the HKTV incident, you see the response, 5 pages. It's a laughing stock here. So the director of the CE's office should shoulder his responsibility for the incident. Mr. Wong Yuk-man proposes to cut a budget of $3.4 million. I think Mr. Wong wants to clear the CE's office by driving out the incompetent ones. But I think the opposition camp have got some logic about this, because we see where the problem lies. Mr. Yao should be here. And like Mr. Kwok-hung, he should be here telling people that I never drink tea with milk. He should be here to rebut what I'm saying. You may think that I have spent too much time on Mr. Yao Tanghua, Mr. Albert Yao. I think this is well known to all. He was a secretary. He did not do his job. And I'm not counting the wrongdoing he has committed since he has been working for Mr. C.Y. Leung. Chairman, you arranged our visit to Shanghai, but Mr. C.Y. Leung came out and talked about the visit in empty terms. I said that Mr. Yao is a good PR expert, and all of a sudden it's said that the visit had been arranged by the CE. But I don't know who did that. There was only one snack that we had with him in the evening. You are digressing. Well, I think the director of the CE's office has disgraced the CE, and he's acting out of turns, and he's breaching the protocol. All right, turning to Chen Jinping. Last year, we severely criticized this person. Let's not repeat what we said. From my experience, I know he's not capable. I can tell you from my personal experience. I said I wanted to go to Shanghai. Well, the SAR government did not send anyone to talk to me because there was a previous record when there was a visit to Chi-chuen, and I did something. Although I'm just a electrical counselor who lives in a public rental housing estate, and I queue up outside the CTS office. And this Mr. Chan is responsible for making arrangements on the mainland for the CE. And since Mr. C.Y. Leung wants to claim the credit, Chairman, you shouldn't have taken care of me. It should be done by Mr. Chen. We are independent, and this is about government-to-government arrangements. Mr. Chan is so familiar with mainland affairs, and I was exposed to the elements. I queued up, and then there were rumors circulating asking why I was there. Well, I didn't go there very often, and I did not know where to take my photo. In the past, there was no need for me to do it myself. I just hand over a photo. It's back in 2005, and everything was done for me. Well, you are spending too much time on this. Well, I'm talking about Mr. Chiang Kai-ping, and I'm talking about my personal experience. And our Secretary General, Mr. Chan, has to be involved to withstand the pressure of Shanghai customs. And you had to go with Mr. Chan. You tell them that I'm Mr. Jasper Chang, President of LegCo. I think you are digressing. But that's how incapable this Mr. Chiang Kai-ping is. And we're talking about $2.99 million. And the officer at the Shanghai Customs asked who is the president of the Legislative Council. I said it was just like the chairman of the NPC. Mr. Chan knows his way on the mainland. He should have said that it's just the chairman. Mr. Leung, I must remind you again that you are digressing again. So our president have to suffer the impolite treatment with me, and then he looked awful. He had to take away the envelope before I can hand the letter to you. What is Mr. Chan doing by getting the $2.99 million? Mr. Chiang Kai-ping has connections on the mainland. He knows how things are done on the mainland. And he got the two customs officials to deal with us. And they should have tell you that your colleague is not allowed to be admitted. And now we are trusting the wrong people. $2.99 million. You would have done a much better job than this person. You should say, I'm the president. And I'm not digressing. $2.99 million. If he was not there, you should listen to me first. If Mr. Chiang Kai-ping was there, if he was sent by the CE to join us, there would be no such problems. And he knew the legal system. He knew he had connections. He know people. He know how things are done. Just a couple of calls would do the trick. He should have just called the secretary to the party secretary of Shanghai. You are digressing. We are talking about new things. I'm not digressing. Everyone, Mr. C.Y. Leung included, everyone has this tacit agreement that Mr. Chiang Kai-ping has been appointed because he is knowledgeable about mainland affairs, and he gets $2.99 million a year. How much are we paid? 80,000 a month.
Mr. Chairman, you said I'm digressing. I can't refute you, I know. Many not listening to me, I call for quorum because my speech is so brilliant and they won't want to listen. No, let's bring them back.
你就氣好十足喎，不過後尾打咗個8折啫喎，俾陳教授一鬧你。
Mr. Leung, please take your seat. Members, please do not engage in a dialogue among yourselves in the chamber. Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, do you wish to continue to speak? Mr. Chairman, tea with milk or tea with lemon? It's both tea. Thank you. Mr. Gary Fang. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak on Amendment number 31, Head 21, Chief Executive's Office, Subhead 000, to reduce the estimate by $1.5 million. That is equal to the total. That's equal to the full year expenditure on overseas visits for the chief executive. Now, the chief executive kept saying that he must do a proper job in home relations. He actually visits the mainland almost once a month at least. He either goes and visits mainland officials or attends official functions. He says such home relations activities would help to promote the relations between Hong Kong and the mainland and promote trade as well. But if we refer to the official reports, we can see that that's actually not the case. That is what he said. And I can criticize him for wasting public money. That's why I want to cut his budget for out-of-town visits. Now, some have said that the CA likes to go back to the mainland. He's working very hard to gain political mileage for himself. Unlike previous chief executives, C.Y. Leung doesn't just report his work to Beijing, to the Central People's Government. When he's got nothing else to do, he likes to go to the second tier or third tier cities like Hainan, Guiyang, Nanning, Fuzhou, Xiamen, or some places you don't even know where they are, like Yinzhou, Fengcheng, Gang, and so on. All these places were visited by our chief executive, C.Y. Leung. And then last September, he went to visit Chongqing, and it caused quite an uproar in Hong Kong, and people started to question him about it, because at that time, the Bo Xilai case was already in the limelight, and he visited Chongqing. Was it for promoting trade or for political reasons? Hong Kong people questioned that. Actually, for the majority of the cities I mentioned, yes, most of them are in the Pearl River Delta region. But then they have little connection to Hong Kong, and we don't see any special business opportunities there. And also, if there is need to sign any cooperation agreement, there is no need for the CE to attend himself. He could have left it to the Financial Secretary, John Zhang, or the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, Professor K.C. Chang, or Greg So, the Secretary for Commercial and Economic Development, for Commerce and Economic Development. There are a lot of issues in Hong Kong, like planning issues, livelihood issues, that have to be attended to by the Chief Executive, C.Y. Leung. Now, livelihood issues are important. Home relations take secondary importance. That's what I would tell C.Y. Leung, but he seems to have put it the wrong way around. He goes to the mainland almost every month. Sometimes it's in response to invitations. Sometimes he's asked to go and meet leaders or officials of these cities and provinces. Now, he's using the pretext that he's looking for business opportunities, but actually he's using public money to try to build his own political connections. Our first chief executive, C.Y. Tong, or Chi-chuen, resigned for health reasons, and then he was immediately appointed the deputy chairman of the NPC. Now, C.Y. Leung was an important figure in the Chi-chun's era. Of course, he knows very well what connections Chi-chung has now. He encourages Hong Kong people to go to the mainland for further career development. He's even implementing policies to encourage Hong Kong mainlanders to come to Hong Kong. So all that he's doing is trying to please the CBG. That's only too obvious. And he would just bring even more mainland visitors to Hong Kong, and there will be other developments that would not bode well for people's livelihood in Hong Kong. That's my criticism. We want to deal properly with the governance of the SAO government in Hong Kong. The Neo-Democrats believe if we cut the expenditure on out-of-town visits for the chief executive, that's an important step, because this will prevent someone from paving the way for further career development or other opportunities after he's finished his term. He cares only about the mainland but not Hong Kong. And also, by cutting his budget for visits, he will have to stay in Hong Kong, and then he'll spend more time and put more attention to livelihood issues. So this, otherwise, his visits are not going to do us any good. Another reason why C.Y. Leung likes to go back to mainland, according to some in the community, is because very often his all expenses are paid for by the mainland. Like in April 2013, he attended a Bo-ao forum. The Bo-ao Secretariat sponsored his transport in the city, and there were 2 others accompanying the CA. Their accommodation was covered as well. And then last September, he visited Guizhou. It was a 2-day trip. And again, the 2-day trip was sponsored by the Guizhou government, including transportation within the city and the accommodation for the CA and his 3 others accompanying him. So the chief executive seems to be just taking free trips, going sightseeing all around the mainland. He's taking full advantage of all the such benefits. But then what we get back in return may not be more business opportunities, but rather more mess.
What is worrying is that we know that there is no free lunch. When the chief executive represents Hong Kong in overseas visits and use mainland money using Hong Kong's name, well, the bill will be paid by Hong Kong people. Maybe, perhaps in the future, when mainland officials come to Hong Kong, they would require the same protocol to be provided, or they would like to get some concessionary conditions. And when it comes to public policy formulation, we have to take into account their feelings. And when it comes to receiving sponsors, if you are a government official, there has been some cases that has drawn criticism. And C.Y. Leung knowingly commit the same mistake. Towards the end of 2012, a former chief executive, Donald Tsang, was reviewed to receive entertainment in Macau by the business sector, and it's been dubbed a corrupt Donald Tsang. And previously, when Lechko went to the mainland for an official visit, people wonder if there was some conflict of interest. These illustrations shows that if you're a government official and if you receive sponsors, then it will give the impression of corruption. And C.Y. Leung is no exception. We have a plummeting anti-corruption index. And C.Y. Leung, well, on the mainland, they now advocate simplicity and frugality. And if our chief executive is actually doing something good for Hong Kong, he should stop receiving sponsors in his official visits. Otherwise, he will put Hong Kong and the Hong Kong SARG in a difficult position. The Neo-Democrats think that these sponsored trips and what comes, the strings that come with it, is fully known by C.Y. Leung. These intertwining relations with the mainland paves the way to disaster. I appeal to the chief executive to reduce its homeland relations and to salvage Hong Kong's image as a clean city, because if he keeps taking from the mainland, then the debt will build up and Hong Kong people will have to pay. After C.Y. Leung has taken office, he goes for overseas visits once every 2 months. The frequency dwarfs the head of state of other countries. Barack Obama, since as at February, in the past 5 years, he's only visited 32 times out of the country. Putin has done overseas visits 80 times, about once every 2 months. And then the Indian Prime Minister, and he has done 73 visits. So on average, once every 1.64 months. And in the Philippines, Aquino III has not done as many overseas visits. Over the 3.5 years, he's only done 22 overseas visits. So on average, once every 2 months. The frequency of overseas visits of the CE and government officials has attracted concern. They've been doing a lot of overseas visits. Are they actually necessary? In the 7-year term of Donald Tsang, he's done 55 overseas visits. So about once every 1.5 months. When he left the office, he's been heavily criticized for using his position to take overseas trips. And it's been there are a lot of allegations against him. And on top of that was Timothy Tong, of the former chief, the former chief of the ICAC. He wasn't subject to proper supervision, and he received entertainments from in his overseas visits. This has tarnished Hong Kong's image. The practice of overseas visits of this government is also subject to criticism. Eddie Ng, Secretary for Education, since he's taken office, has spent $900,000 on overseas visits. It involves 37 days, covering Indonesia, Singapore, and some European countries, America and Canada. And he's been criticized for doing unnecessary overseas visits, and they should have spent time in Hong Kong to deal with our education issues. The Neo-Democrats are of the view that C.Y. Leung, being the leader of the Hong Kong SARG, should reduce unnecessary overseas visits. The entire team of his should set themselves an example. So I propose to reduce the amount by $1.5 million. In the past year, the total expenditure of all the secretaries and amounts to $6 million. So if my amendment gets the support of legislators, this will rectify the poor practice of frequent overseas visits. And we will in the end reap a savings of $6 million. So legislators should monitor the performance of the government and support my proposed amendment of a reduction of $1.5 million. I so submit. Mr. Ray Chan. Thank you, Chairman. I will talk about Head 21, the CE's office, Subhead 000, in relation to the reduction of expenditure of the Executive Council. I looked at the materials in detail again. There are 7 amendments involving the expenditure of the EXCO. They are 7, 8, 10, 12, 13, 15, and 30. And number 7 and 8 involve the biggest amount. It's a resolution to reduce $20.8 million from subhead 000 of head 21. Which equals to the annual budget of the EXCO. I would like to explain to members that if we are to emasculate the Executive Council, you will have to support items 7 and 8, because item 10 is just a reduction of the remuneration of non-official members of the EXCO. Let me tell you about the composition of the EXCO. The Chief Executive, 15 official members and 14 non-official members. But we don't know. The number 14 is stipulated in any legislation or regulations. So even if you support item 10, that is the reduction of remuneration of all the non-official members, the EXCO, in theory, will continue to operate in the form of 1 chief executive, 15 official members, and no non-official members. Having said that, I think that for the non-official members, even if you ask them to pay to be a member of the EXCO, a lot of people will still swarm to get a place in the sun. Let me give you some more figures. Non-official members, when it comes to remuneration, you will find page 35, 2013-14 original estimate, $13.425 million, and actual spending is 12.0051 million. How come that they have spent less? We have got no information to that account. Now, how come they have spent less? Is it because someone is not drawing the honorarium? Yes. It may include Mr. Franklin Lam, because at one point he was suspended. But when the administration was asked whether he continued to draw the honorarium, we did not get any proper answer. But I heard from the grapevine that he did not draw an honorarium. So the difference between the 13.425 million and the 12.0051, I think that is the honorarium of Franklin Lam. And on top of that, the honorarium of Barry Zhang. And another one is someone I only knew about in the past few days. Arthur Lee asked for no pay leave because of family matters. And I would like to tell you that in relation to the Executive Council or its members, we don't know anything about them. And all the figures I gave you were just a guesstimate only. Well, yesterday I told you about how hard we tried to get an attendance rate. And now if we want to ask a payroll records or actual expenditure, you can imagine how difficult it's going to be. We have the power to approve a funding application, but we don't have the power to monitor it. So we have to think twice whether to approve the sum. Okay, I'm going to leave the confidentiality rule, the collective responsibility system aside. Shouldn't their accounts and expenditure be apparent? Shouldn't they take the initiative to explain to the LegCo? And instead of having the LegCo to dun chase just to get some information, and still we don't get the actual expenditure. And this brings me to another point. We cannot take any of any officials down from the EXCO, as long as you get a note from one particular individual. So as to when you'll be fired, when you get a no-pay leave, when you will be taken from office, we don't have any power to intervene. The only way is to propose an amendment to reduce the expenditure, to exert pressure on the EXCO. The content of the meetings, the agenda items are kept under lock and key. Not only that, the finances, we think on top of that, the finances and attendance rates should all be disclosed to the public. And if we look at 2014-15, well, for 2013, they wanted to get $13 million. But as a result, some people dropping out and stuff like that, they got 12 million. And in the end, they get $12.221 million. As you see, that they did not use the original estimate of 2013, that is $13.425 million. That means that CY Leung did not find two people to fill the places of Franklin Lam and Barry Zhang.
So these two gentlemen are really expendable. The two more or two fewer makes no difference. We have radicals, we have moderates here. Moderates can support a cut of 7 million, or if you're a radical, you can support the total elimination of the council. The most moderate can support number 30. I thank Mr. Albert Chan for proposing this, because the cut is about a reduction of $1.68 million, and that is equivalent to the honorarium of two non-official members of the Executive Council, not counting the convener. I believe with such a reduction in expenditure, the Executive Council can still function properly. And there's a suggestion that if we are to cut certain posts of executive councillors, let's do it with those with dual membership. Mrs. Regina Yip, Ms. Starry Lee, and Mr. Jeffrey Lam. That's a suggestion from Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, but I do not agree with Mr. Leung on this count, because if you are both a LegCo member and an executive councillor, you get a discounted honorarium, 2/3, right? But so the cut will not be as expected. But after careful consideration, I've now decided to agree with Mr. Leung Kwok-hung. There's so many interests involved, and EXCO members who are also LegCo members might have their effectiveness undermined because of the need to avoid conflict of interest. So let's not think about saving money. Well, EXCO convenes a meeting every Tuesday morning, and if this meeting is extended all the way to Tuesday, they would be excused as of right, even if there's a risk of the meeting here being aborted. And these members will also sign up for our Tuesday morning, such as our LegCo Commission meeting. They would just come, stay for a while, and then proceed to join the EXCO. You can't be in two places at the same time. I think if you want to apply for leave, you should apply for leave in respect of the EXCO member and join a LegCo meeting here. And that's in the case when our council meeting is extended all the way to Tuesday. And I'm talking about dual membership here, and some of us are also district councillors. They cannot do so much at the same time. And if you support item number 30 and you want to be specific about who should go, I think we should consider those with dual membership first. And let me also give you the big picture here. This council, in respect of its ability to monitor the EXCO, is close to nothing. Our ability to monitor the work of EXCO is close to nothing. What we can do is to move resolutions to cut EXCO expenditure here. We can cut the financial provision by, say, $1 just to make a gesture and to exert some pressure. If we are to cut 2 Executive Council members, I would suggest you consider doing away with 2 that I have in mind. And I want to make 2 proposals so that you can judge for yourself. If we want to delete 1, let's do away with Cheung Ji-kwong. Cheung Ji-kwong has been dubbed the #1 henchman of the CE. He has been trying to protect the CE and defend the CE. And he's a typical case of tailoring his comment in accordance with the perceived benefit. When Mr. C. Wai-leung was rated very high in polls, he praised the posters and the way the polls were conducted. But when the ratings were not favorable, he criticized the polls as being misleading. He claimed that 62% of those polled gave the CE 50 points or more, and he criticized the Hong Kong Yiu, the POP, as not telling people the truth. And 38.2% gave him a mark of 1 to 49, 0 to 49, 28.6, 50, 33.1% from 51 to 100. The medium is 47.5. And this executive councillor, Mr. Cheung Ji-kwong, tried to stand truth on his head, and he tried to make a failure look like a success. Or he should work for the Hong Kong EAA so that students would get a pass mark even when they fail. And Mr. Cheung Ji-kwong also has multiple roles. He is also the head of the One Country, Two System Research Institute. There's a conflict between the 2 roles. I would like to suggest to Mr. Cheung Ji-kwong that he should not take up the membership in EXCO. He should just be the head of the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Albert Chan. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, I was talking about the information coordinator and his problems. When it comes to the distribution of duties and the division of labor, no one would question the importance of this particular post in the CE's office. It's a senior government official we are talking about. As I mentioned in my last speech, the major duties to be discharged by this post holder. The question is, when you hire this person, did you give people the impression that it was done fairly and honestly? If you don't know certain people, that you may be scared by what they say, thinking that they are very remarkable. But the more you know some people, the more you know that they are not really very capable. I know people who have just been there to curry favor with the powerful. This information coordinator has been known to me for more than 20 years, more than 10 years. And I think he's a very weak analyst. When I read how he analyzes different social issues and policy issues. So in terms of the character, this is the person I know. And when I know that he's going to assume an important post in the government, and whatever he does will affect the well-being of the community and the operation of the government. And let's not be personal. I don't think you to think that I have a negative impression of people close to him just because I don't like Mr. C.Y. Leung. Let's be more objective here. If we just look at the appointment from the perspective of how public money is spent, we are in the opposition. We don't like the many government policies, but we don't want the government to do a poor job because the well-being of our people will be affected. But when you see that an incompetent person is to be appointed to an important post, we will say that this is going to be a recipe for disaster. This is going to be a disaster for the Ci's office, for Mr. Leung Chun-yan as well. And my concerns are backed by facts. The annual pay is $2.61 million for this information coordinator. He compares himself to the White House spokesman. At the very first press conference on the policy address, his performance was scandalous. I don't know who was trying to protect him. Maybe he was planted in the Democratic Party, and he completed his political assignment, and therefore he was offered an important post in the SAR government. I think that was the work of the liaison office. I don't know. I don't think the FS, the CS4A, or the director of Ci's office have got any admiration for this particular information coordinator. Maybe he was used by the liaison office or the Chinese Communist Party for certain tasks, and after successfully completed the assignment given him by the Communist Party, he was given this award and appointed to this post. In the first press conference he organized, he committed mistakes which would not have been committed by ordinary people. And the mistakes are all over the place. For example, if you are the MC for a press conference, you have to arrange for questions to be put by different reporters. You know how to say it. You know where to stand, and you always act professionally. And he nearly got the procedures wrong. He did not have quick reaction, quick response, and the reporters felt that they were slighted. In the Q&A session, he was supposed to name the reporter, but he called the reporter by his or her full name. He was eager to show his authority, just like what a teacher would do when he calls a student, or a headmaster would do when he calls the name of a student. He thought he was just like a teacher vis-a-vis the reporter. Well, when Mr. President wants to expel me, he would say that Mr. Albert Chan, you are expelled. And we are called the Honorable Mr. Albert Chan for that matter. In other parliaments, they would refer to members as the honorable member from a certain constituency and not the name.
It's the same in this chamber. We just call officials by their post title, not their full name. Now, of course, we call the CE 689. That's unusual. Or you call officials freeloaders. Again, that's rare, but it only happens these days. So he doesn't even know how to respect people. This is common courtesy. That shows what sort of a person he is. And the way he stood, I don't know if he's suffered any deficiency. Maybe he's got a problem somewhere. So he stand the way he stood, you know, like a V. It looked so odd and awkward. Look at the photos. When I looked at the photos that day, I thought maybe there's something wrong with his health. He's got some sort of a problem. That's why he had to stand that way. Now, I'm not digressing, Lam Tai Fai. I'm talking about the professional performance of this person. Now, have you ever seen the White House spokesman stand that way? No. And there are other minor demeanors, you know, like when you hosting a conference and kept looking at your watch. Now, if someone keeps looking at his watch, that shows that he's nervous or uneasy. You know, he feels uncomfortable. That's why he would keep looking at the watch. But when you are hosting a press conference, you should feel at ease and confident. You should be overseeing the whole venue. You should show confidence. Now, Mr. Chairman, when you host a meeting, you don't keep looking at the watch. So that shows that he has no confidence, he's incompetent, and he doesn't have common sense in dealing with some issues or in conducting himself. And then he couldn't even control the time properly. Now, he made it clear that the press conference was to last 45 minutes, but 3 minutes earlier he declared the press conference closed. And the reporters were in uproar because some wanted to ask questions. You said you would allow 45 minutes, but then you finished 3 minutes earlier, and people didn't get to ask questions. Was it because DC was incompetent? He couldn't answer questions. But so these are mistakes that shouldn't have happened. Other than getting the time wrong, I don't know if it was deliberate or his watch was not functioning, or he didn't want the CE to answer another question. Maybe that's the case. He thought the CE was starting to make blunders. He didn't want him to embarrass himself. That's why he stopped him from answering more questions. Maybe that's the real reason. But of course, we're in no position to speculate. Anyway, as an official, you told the media they had 45 minutes. You should give them the full 45 minutes. Mr. Albert, I think you are being too detailed. That's the last point, Mr. Chairman. I'm coming to my last point. Being selective in inviting questions, now that's a serious mistake. Reporters usually only get a chance to ask one question. Some never get a chance to. But then there's some pro-China media that's been named twice to ask questions. That's some reporters from the Phoenix TV. Of course, other reporters would not be happy about it, because you should host press conference impartially. You shouldn't favor anybody. Now, you try that in the U.S. If you're the White House spokesman and you do that, the reporters won't let you off. But then he could actually allow the reporter from Phoenix TV to ask questions twice. I'm not sure if the criticisms are the same as that for Chen Kin-ping. Now we moving towards mainlandization in dealing with press conference. So there's a distinction between friends and foes. Maybe that's why. So it's the you and them, you and us mentality. So maybe that's the case. But, the way he conducted himself at that press conference, certainly he wasn't quite up to the job, so he should be removed from his post. Now, maybe you're not happy with the other amendments moved by the People Power, but for amendment number 25, cutting the budget by $2.6 million, the equivalent of the wage of the news coordinator, definitely the information coordinator, definitely you should support this one. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Chairman, I'm speaking on amendment number 25 and 29. Number 29 is the one moved by Mr. Albert Chan. That is to reduce the estimate by $2.61 million under subhead 000 head 21. And then Mr. Raymond Wong has proposed a different figure for the reduction. $2.18 million. How come there are two different figures? Well, I don't know why. I'm at a loss too. But then the difference isn't substantial. So perhaps I could take the two amendments together as I speak. The information coordinator of the Chief Executive's office. In our establishment, this post was created only after the reunification. Now, Chi-chuen was always pursued by the media, but then he always committed gaffe. Like the Chinese New Year, you might recall there was traffic accident. 2 were killed, several were injured, and people asked him what he thought, and he said, "Kong hei fat choi." Of course, that's really a poor response. Now, any of you, if you've dealt with Chi-chuen, often he says something not right. Like 85,000, he could say something like, "Well, I don't mention it anymore, that means we're not doing it." Or with Falun Gong, whether there's a cult, he said is more or less a cult. So he's got plenty of such cases, his gaffe. And Lo Chang-on, I won't even mention that. That case, you might say I'm digressing. But anyway, the information coordinator, should we have this post? Is it worth having this post? There are supposed to be 8 tasks on the job description. Now, I won't read out the full list. I'll just read out 4 of the 8 duties. First one, for major policies, formulate a strategy for promotion and PR. That's A. B, to coordinate the time frame for announcing major policies. I think that's a duplication. F, to be the spokesman of the CE as necessary. Another one, to plan and organize the official functions of the CE, like giving speeches, paying visits to districts, meeting with editors and reporters, and attending press conferences and so on. So, of course, these are the usual tasks. I think this post came about because of our colonial history. Because in the colonial days, you couldn't even get to see the governor. But then when Chris Patten came, after he had egg tart, he started this politician way of acting. That is, he likes to meet with the press. He will go and have egg tart and so on. So therefore, his successors have no choice but to face the people. And that's why they have to come out and to do things like this. You know, in the past, when the British government sent a governor, he didn't care. He wouldn't meet with the people. So this post could be scrapped altogether. Now, if we have such an election culture, and then the CE has to face the public and speak to the public, then it's fine. We don't need such a post. It's like in the United States, if there's an inquiry or whatever, it could be referred. There is, or, you know, at the White House, they have the regular press conference, and it would be F, that is to act as the spokesman of the chief executive as necessary. That's why I think this post is superfluous. I think we should just scrap the post altogether. It's a waste of money. You know, with C.Y. Leung, you know, what good would Andrew Fung do for him? The master himself is so capable. He's able to do everything. So what's the purpose of having the coordinator? He'll be just like a pig, you know. You just get fat and juice and delicious and juicy. And Carrie Lam, or Stephen Lam, now he's started all these new terms that I'm a human recorder. You know, see, he's good at mocking himself. Now, Stephen Lam came about because Anson Chang, at the time she hasn't, you know, got into trouble with C.H. Tong, and she introduced one of her subordinates to C.H. Tong, Stephen Lam. Mr. Leung, you are digressing. Am I digressing? I'm trying to explain the system. I think you've got me wrong. I'm not just talking about cutting this post. I'm talking about cutting this whole system altogether. Because under the basic law, we cannot change the system, but then we could cut the salary so then there's no more the system or opposed or the establishment, whatever. So I have to explain this to colleagues, because colleagues might say, you want people to do work and you don't want to pay them? How can you do that? Now, I've been criticized many times, like by Kwok-hung, you know. It's probably because they're not smart enough. So I have to think like them. I have to be not so smart. And so that's why I have to explain to them why we are trying to cut the salary, because we are trying to remove posts that do Hong Kong no good, that do the CE no good. I tried to explain that these posts weren't there from the beginning. Stephen Lam, you all know him. He's now gone to become a pastor or whatever. Anyway, let's forget about Stephen Lam. And then hold on Tat. Again, he came from the media, but he's invented this thing called a spin doctor. That means he taught or a political makeup artist. That is, he taught Donald Tsang not to say anything, just to keep putting on makeup. So that's what he did. Mr. Leung, please do not digress. Now, you must have heard this. That is this young girl putting on makeup secretly. And so, but then she didn't know how to put on makeup, and so after she put on makeup, her face looked like a bum. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Leung is giving such an eloquent speech. I think more members should come and listen to his speech. So I call for a quorum.
梁國雄議員。
Mr. Kwok-hung. Oh, well, no one was here to listen to my poem reading. I was talking about the second information coordinator. His idea was not related to the job description of the information coordinator A to G. He advocates he changing this position into a spin doctor, and this is just like what a politician would do, to lie, to spin things around. Well, and a CE that is not eloquent finds a parrot to speak for him. This is just political spinning. This runs counter to the idea that a CE should be accountable to the people of Hong Kong. He should be the one that uphold justice and not do the bid of the 120 people. Let's see how this system damaged Donald Tsang's time when he was squandering money. The information coordinator could not fulfill its duty from A to G, that is to coordinate the timetable of the introduction of major policies and programs, and to act as spokesman for the CE as and when required, to manage the press office in the CE's office, to liaise with local and international media on behalf of the CE. He did not do anything. When it was reviewed that he was spending a lot of money on his trips and on entertainment, his information coordinator did not manage to contain the situation. And then it was Jun Tang. It was more ridiculous. Well, we are quite effective in our work in monitoring the administration. However, we see that the administration is doing things wrong time and again. And what is C.Y. Leung doing? And C.Y. Leung thinks that he is better than everyone in coming up with a hot air. And in effect, he doesn't need this position of information coordinator. He asked someone who is going to retire soon to cultivate the relationship between the government and the media. And this position, in effect, emasculate the power of the media to monitor the administration. If C.Y. Leung learns from the mistakes, then when Jun Tang retires, he should not have appointed another person. And Stephen Lam is just a parrot. We have Hong An-dat, which is a spin doctor, and Jun Tang, who did not do anything. And now we have Andrew Fung. And on the 23rd of June 2013, Jun Tang was appointed. Well, after a spate of scandals like Mark Chai-kwong, the CE wanted a good relationship with the media. And on the 23rd of August, she was appointed. And a month later, 2 months later, September, she resigned. Because members here, myself included, heavily criticized that she did not do a good job. But our administration corrects in the wrong way. Andrew Fung was appointed. He was useless, and he is useless. He treats the media as their arch enemies. He looked at his watch, and it's a sign to, it's a sign that, he was impatient, and he couldn't wait for the journalists to leave. This Andrew Fung is very good at second guessing the will of his superior. And that means C.Y. Leung doesn't even have a sounding board. And it's just like he's covering all the mirrors in C.Y. Leung's toilet so that C.Y. cannot see what is actually happening. He's famous for just echoing government stance about the national education. A big group of people turn up against the idea of national education. C.Y. Leung's government said that, well, let's forget about it. And Andrew Fung came out to say that he supports national education. He did not come from the media sector. He did not know anything about the media, and he belittles people who have no power. And he is a traitor of the Democratic Party. Do you know that Chairman Mao was betrayed by Lin Biao, and Lin Biao was killed? And now we have this system to enable two people two incapable people to be working alongside. I do think that this position should not exist in the first place. Mr. Albert Ho, I speak in support of Ms. Helena Wong's amendments. Item number 713. Head number 142. The resolution to reduce subhead 000 under head 142 by $105.004 million, which equals to the annual estimated expenditure of the Central Policy Unit. We all see that in recent years, the operation of the CPU has been quite poor, in particular after C.Y. Leung has taken office. It's very clear that this is a tool to govern Hong Kong. It's not a public policy research center. It's not a political tool. This is going to be a propaganda machine. This is completely different from what people expect, which is a research institute that provides profound insight for the government about what's going on in society.
And through objective and scientifically conducted opinion polls, the government can feel the pulse of the community, and also in order to devise policies that would benefit our people. What they are doing is far removed from our expectation. Since Mr. C.Y. Leung became the CE, it has been clear that the CPU has been under the control of his supporters and no one else. It was even worse when Professor Lau Siu-kai was the head. And the nepotism is all too plain for everyone to see. Let's look at the Miss Sophie Kao, Miss Wong Chuk-kei, and Mr. Siu Sin-po. He's the head. He's a die-hard C.Y. Leung supporter. His attitude is arrogant and overbearing. And towards this council, where we have many members representing the public, he's impatient. And there's also a policy under which Ms. Sophie Kao would be the first authority to vet candidates for public appointments. And she will be doing this for Mr. C.Y. Leung. So there is a sort of C.Y. Leung dynasty that we have in the realm of public appointments. And we are also infuriated by the way they spend public funds. Let me give you an example. In the past, the Central Policy Unit would not interfere with academic research. That's the Research Grant Council. Every year is responsible for dispersing $20 million to the institutions, scholars in various institutions to carry out research. The annual budget was $20 million. These scholars will have to propose themes of study depending on the importance socially, and then the academic standard will be assessed. And there are international experts to offer advice in the vetting process. And of course, the ultimate decision rests with the UGC. But starting from 2003, the UGC received that the power would be taken back by the CPU. So it's just a mere provision of $20 million to universities for carrying out independent research projects. And yet they wanted to take back the power for the disbursements. Mr. Xu Xinpo, head of the CPU, blatantly said this, that these research projects would be conducted to lay the theoretical foundation for government policies. It should be the other way around. You must have the theoretical foundation, and then you carry out research and devise your policy. Because your theoretical foundation, including your values, will be the basis of your policy formulation. But of course, you also have to know the society, and you should also explore the feasibility before you devise and formulate policies. And in the process, you must carry out consultation work. But it seems that the reverse is now the rule for the administration. You have the policy first, and then you try to build a basis. So it's a sort of policy on the basis of directives. And now the CPU is an out-and-out political tool. It's just a propaganda apparatus. So why do we allow the funding to be provided to the CPU now? It's just meaningless. It's just $20 million for the research projects annually. We know that consultancy studies can cost you hundreds of millions of dollars, and yet the CPU has taken back the power to distribute the $20 million of research funds. And they have extended their long arm into the field of academic research, thus affecting the autonomy of these institutions. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, and from this you know how big the problem might be. So what can they gain through such a research? In recent years, we are very concerned about universal retirement, a pension scheme for the community. Well, it's not that the CPU has not conducted any research on this. I think at least they have done 3 studies. They commissioned at least 3 studies. And then they thought the findings were not useful. First, there have been demographic changes. They didn't know that so many babies would be born to mainland parents in Hong Kong. And then there was the financial tsunami changing the macroeconomic climate, and it was considered that the research would no longer be appropriate. And now Professor Nelson Chow is entrusted to carry out another consultancy study on universal retirement protection. But we do have the right to ask the CPU to produce those reports for our inspection. Although some of the assumptions may no longer be appropriate in this day and age because of changing circumstances, but we should have a right to know the data and the assumptions used, because they will also provide the basis for comparing the past studies with the one conducted by Professor Nelson Chow. But the CPU insisted that the reports should not be made public. They said they were no longer applicable, and they were just filed away. How can this be allowed? Well, they have a system of nepotism, and the CPU operates behind closed doors. This important institution has become a political tool of the C.Y. Leung administration. It's there to serve political agenda. It's there to carry out propaganda for Mr. C.Y. Leung. It's not a public tool. It's something for their private purposes. We are dissatisfied with the current situation. There are so many issues that we need to look into, and they should have been covered by CPU research and studies. For example, the wealth gap. We want to prevent Hong Kong becoming an M-shaped society. We want to reform our taxation system. And also, we have not yet found a way out to improve our healthcare system. There are so many issues that we need to look further into. For example, the administrative reform of the hospital authority. We need to get the experts involved. The population is aging, which will lead to long-term healthcare and nursing problems. This council has a secretariat, and we have competent staff to carry out research for us. But such research cannot be compared to those commissioned by the government, which is a big organization. And the bureaus also have their own money to hire people to conduct research. Annually speaking, just for consultancy studies, they are going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars. So we are pained by the thoughts that the CPU is not there to serve our needs. I just can't see how that this CPU is serving Hong Kong, and it's that is putting the interests of Hong Kong first, and that is capable of feeling the pulse of the community and offer us with good policy choices. No, they can't do any of these. It has become a political machinery. So what's the use of this unit? We want to withhold the funding so as to send a strong political message. And that is, we say in the strongest terms our opposition to this direction of theirs. If they return to the right track and they get the right people and adopt a transparent procedure for fund allocation, and and if they get good people and find better ways to spend the money wisely and conduct the research projects that are beneficial to the community and to the government, and as a result, they can raise the standard of political commentary in the government, in this council, in the community. That would be the right way to go. Don't regard our proposal to cut the funding as a negative message, because we have expectations. Does any other member wish to speak? Chairman, we have only got 10 members here. I want to count the number of members present for a quorum.
有冇委員要發言？
Does any member wish to speak? Mr. Ray Chen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Albert Ho spoke in support of Dr. Helena Wong's Amendment Number 713. Head 142, Chief Secretary's Office and Financial Secretary's Office to reduce the estimate by about the equivalent of a full year operational cost of the Central Policy Unit. I hope Mr. Albert Ho would also support my amendment number 716. Mine is very similar to that of Dr. Helena Wong. Mine is different in that we propose to cut the budget under head 142 subhead 00 by $105.003 million. The difference is $1,000, mine and Dr. Helena Wong's amendment. So if you vote down Dr. Wong's amendment, you can support mine. Now, but I haven't finished my speech on why Executive Council members' pay ought to be cut, the expenditure on the honorarium ought to be cut. Actually, what I'm going to say is similar to, is in agreement with what Mr. Albert Ho said. Now, Chi-chuen heads the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute. His institute has received more than $2 million for policy research in the past few years. $1.35 million were allocated to the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute, headed by Mr. Chi-chuen. And in the coming year, this institute will again receive another $7,700,000 of allocation. So in total, in the past 3 years, the institute received $2.21 billion in public money for research. Now, the CPU has given the biggest allocation to the Hong Kong University. And after the Hong Kong University, the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute has received the most allocation from CPU. Members queried that, and in the written response it said that in the past 2 years and the current financial year, in 2012 to 13, the Institute was commissioned to conduct its media studies, $368,000, and the mainland study, $220,000. And this year, the Institute will still be commissioned to conduct media study. You know, a media study, not entertainment study. In Chinese, the two characters sound the same. So in 2 years, there's a total of $1.54 million. This whole allocation process seems like it's just a private club business. So it's they're paying their own people. Why do people get this impression? Because the head of CPU, Mr. Xiu Xinpo, was the former Chief Executive of the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute. Mr. Chi-chuen is the incumbent Chief Executive of the Institute. So there are intricate ties between the two. And that's why you can't blame Hong Kong people for casting doubt. And of course, both of them are loyal Leung fans. Now, Chi-chuen is now also an executive councillor. And that's the reason why I propose to cut the budget for EXCO members' honorarium, equivalent to the honorarium for one member. Now, I'm not going to talk about all the EXCO members. I'll just pick 2 or 3 EXCO members, and I'll give you some examples to support my amendment, and I hope members will in turn support my this amendment moved by Mr. Albert Chen. Now, the funding allocation to the One Country, Two Systems Research Institute is one reason why I don't think Chiang Chih-kung should stay the executive councillor. Another case recently is about about a mainland visitor relieving himself in Mongkok. Now, Chiang Chih-kung did not speak in his capacity of EXCO member. Instead, he published an article in his capacity as the chief executive of the research institute. He said that that may be an uncivilized act, and we should act in a civilized manner in response. Chiang Chih-kung believes the conflict is not really the crux of the matter. It is rather how what attitude we adopt in dealing with the conflict. He said if in future a child again relieves himself on the street, if Hong Kong citizen provides him with a plastic bag or directs him to the nearest public toilet, that would be much better than pointing a finger at the child. And people would not challenge such behavior from us. But I think what he says is better than perhaps what Greg So said. He's just asking people to collect plastic bags and hand over to these people. But what does he mean by, responding in a civilized manner to uncivilized behavior? This is more than just an uncivilized behavior. And not uncivilized behavior means you speak a foul language. But here, this is a criminal act. It's against the law to do that on the street, to defecate on the street. So as an EXCO member, he should point out that this person's committed an offense. He should ask the relevant law enforcement agency to enforce the law. Now, what he said actually is counterproductive. We've seen how things have developed in the past few days. Next time when we talk about being tolerant or providing assistance, we have to think twice. It's actually escalated the matter to a high level. He believes that some are taking the opportunity to voice opposition against the Communist Party, the Central People's Government, or whatever. Anyway, I won't comment on that. As an EXCO member, I think it's totally inappropriate for him to say that. If he's the bouncer of CY Leung, there are many party newspapers now. You could always publish articles there. We're just going to argue in writing. But as an EXCO member, making such a comment, I think is unacceptable. Now, I want to talk about some who are both EXCO and national members. Both of them, two of them are here. Sari Lee and Regina Ip are here. Is Jeffrey Lam here? No, Lam is not here, so I'll talk about him. Jeffrey Lam is the chairman of the Mega Events Fund Committee. The latest audit report has leveled criticism on the committee. The monitoring of events seem to have major flaws. So now, the Audit Commission sent long staff to observe some of the events. The Hong Kong Line Dance Festival, it receives over $1 million from the fund every year, but then there are children taking part in the performance, but there are no invoices or records of payment. But in accordance with the agreement, the organizer has undertaken to provide 3,000 job opportunities for Hong Kong people. But then when the audit staff observed the event, they found that those performers were not actually professionals. Many were just young children accompanied by their parents. Some were elderly persons.
And in the end, the preparatory committee admitted that they have recruited just over 1,000 performers. But this year, after inquiry, they admitted that the number of jobs created has dropped to just over 1,300. And the Audit Commission found that there are no invoices, no quotations when it comes to procurement. I think you should discuss this in the Public Accounts Committee, not here. Okay, I'm not going to go into details, but I will talk to you about the conclusion. Otherwise, it's not complete. So, the Megas Events Fund, which has got an injection of $250 million. So it wasn't supervised properly. Jeffrey Lam is the chairman of the assessment committee. He refuses to apologize. Someone reported the case to the ICAC, saying that the Lions and Dragon Dance extravaganza is suspected to involve fraud. Jeffrey Lam said that this is unfounded. So instead of saying that there is no evidence, he accused the one who made the report for making a political show, putting up a political show. These are only two examples of the problems of members of the EXCO. Well, I'm not going to go in detail about a particular person, so I have another candidate. If you want to support item 30, Mr. Albert Chan's item, the reduction of 2 members. If you don't want to choose Jeffrey Lam or Cheung Chi-kung, then you can choose Mrs. Fanny Law. She's the #1 fan of C.Y. Leung. It was rumored that she will be the person in charge of the election office of C.Y. Leung for the next term. She very often came out to make personal statements, but as a result, the government will have to pick up the pieces for her, because every time she came out to say something, it caused an uproar. Let me give you an example of the numerous examples. She said that the central authorities indicated that in relation to the chief executive election, that there should be gatekeeping of the candidates, not just the end result. They have to make sure that someone who doesn't antagonize the central authorities, who is patriotic and love the country, should only those people should be made candidates. And the central authorities should also gatekeep against someone who is not the favorite. They don't want surprise, because a candidate may smear another one, and as a result, the popular one did not get elected in the end, and there will be a surprise result. Mrs. Fanny Law said that Hong Kong is not a sovereignty. So before making a comment, Hong Kong people should read the basic law and know the one country, two system first. And she also said that, people just take in whatever the press said. And it's just like they just take in a big gulp whatever they are fed. So very often after she came out to say something, a lot more people come out to criticize her. And every time she came out to say something controversial, it was the government officials who come out to pick up the pieces. Well, if the EXCO members don't represent government stance, then Raymond Tam didn't have to come out to clarify by saying that Fanny Law Fanny Law's words doesn't represent the government's stance. I may not have time to go into the proposed ITB, that is the Innovation and Technology Bureau, and also the Science Park. It was rumored that Fanny Law will be the chairman of the Science Park, that CY Leung supporters is now being placed everywhere. I don't have time, so I'll elaborate later. I hope that you will support Mr. Albert Chan's amendments. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Albert Chan. Well, we're going to talk about items 36 and 37. However, Mr. Ray Chan talked about my amendment to reduce the remuneration of 2 EXCO members. So I will briefly go over that. Well, I was going to talk about what he said. I'm not going to repeat it. Previously, I talked about the performance of the CE's office and also the performance of governance. There are major mistakes made. Hong Kong's governance has got worse and worse, and people are suffering. Mr. Ray Chen mentioned Chi-chuen. I have come across him a number of times in a current affairs program in ATV. He's quite good at debates compared to other loyalists. He likes a challenge. He tries to get his points across. He tries to establish the authority of the administration and garner public support. Unfortunately, perhaps just like people who are close to Chinese Communist Party, and over the years, these people have been forgotten, sidelined, and as a result, they have developed some kind of personality disorder, say an inferiority. They lack self-esteem and they act out. Say, for example, they will try to show off to compensate. There is an imbalance. Chi-chuen is a classic example. When it comes to competence, I think definitely he is better than the information coordinator by a wide margin. But when it comes to dealing with major issues, he's too eager to claim glory. But he doesn't have experience in public administration. Public administration is an area that requires expertise. You have to be in it. You have to participate in the formulation and implementation of public policy. You have to have experience in facing the public and the media. Otherwise, you just be led along. And if you're too eager to get results, you will not be able to get to understand the crux of the problem and feel accurately the pulse of society. When there is an error of judgment, you will not be able to deal with the situation, and instead you will make things worse. Say, for example, in the Chi-chuen era, if you know very well about public administration, you'll be able to resolve crises. But this government creates crises themselves. And it's their own doing that their popularity is so low. Thanks to people like Chi-chuen, who are EXCO members. They also contribute to these disasters. In the minds of Ray Chan, Leung Kwok-hung and myself, that he's actually the #1 hatchet man of C.Y. Leung. Well, as you know that these hatchet men are a frequent occurrence in the Cultural Revolution. If you kick him away, if you kick him out, you're actually helping C.Y. Leung. So the first one that should be rid of should be this hatchet man, Chung Chi-kong. Another one, I share the view of Ray Chan, is Fanny Law. Well, I'm not going to repeat about her performance as a government official, because her performance as a government official may not have anything to do with her current performance, because, well, some people may be poor at being civil servants, but they excel in being a political figure. But I just think that in the case of Fanny Law, that she's simply wrong in a lot of things. Let me give you an example where I have first-hand information. After C.Y. Leung has taken office, on a number of issues, we have voiced our strong opinion. We have displayed our political stance. We challenge the administration. But seldom do we see this lady approaching us or people power to discuss the issues. On a number of occasions, finally, she arranged to meet me and Ray Chan. The discussion was about the establishment of the ITB. She hoped that people power will not use different means to stop the establishment. I find it strange. I asked her, "Are you going to be the secretary?" She did not give me a clear answer. Well, basically, she said that she would not be the secretary for this bureau, and we believed her. And I think she's not going to take any senior post in the government. But there are rumors that should there be an ITB, and if there are any committees, she's going to be the chairman of that committee. You may remember that when she was electioneering for C.Y. Leung, it was rumored that she would be given an important post. And she said openly that she would not accept any public office. When I think in anyone's eyes, a member of the EXCO is a public office. So she said she wasn't going to accept any public office, and then she turned out to be a member of the EXCO. Is a display of her practice to mislead and her practice of sophistry. There are a lot of livelihood issues, political issues. There are conflicts between the legislature and the executive. This lady is an EXCO member. She knows us well. So if she sincerely wanted to do good for C.Y. Leung, Hong Kong and Hong Kong people, she should talk to us on a number of issues. But she's almost never approached us to talk about major public issues, me or Ray Chan, to seek our views, to talk to us over a cup of tea.
杯奶茶。
Or we can have Mr. Kwok-hung joining us to have a cup of tea with milk? No, never. At that point, it was an initial concept. It was a preliminary idea because of the difference of opinion within the administration, whether the ITB should be submitted for reconsideration. Because in the first reorganization, ITB was among the new bureaus to be created, but the plan fell through because of technicalities. But Mrs. Fanny Lord was very brave and took the initiative to handle this idea of resurrecting or creating the ITB afresh. We didn't have a thought of Mrs. Fanny Law didn't have a track record in the IT field. If you are rich in experience in the IT field and you want to take the lead in creating this bureau because of her personal background, then there is a prima facie case to convince the public that you are the right person to do it, to spearhead the task. But she has no background of this sort. Suddenly, she tried to lobby the two of us about the IT bureau. And some pan-Democrats were supportive. And they, at that point, did not express such views to the public. And there was no discussion in the media about the ITB. And yet she, of her own accord, took up the task to clear the obstacles. And Mr. Chi-chuen and I told her in no uncertain terms that we would not support the creation of the ITB. But the government decided to table the proposal all the same. So did she do it for her own interest, for the interest of the government, or for the community? Well, it's up to you to judge. But I would say that she's been selective in handling such issues. And it doesn't give people a good impression about her. So, in respect of amendment number 30, and that is cutting the honorarium of 2 executive council members, and i.e. a cut of $1.68 million, not a big cut. Even if we successfully cut the budget by $1.68 million, would that mean the 2 executive council members that we would like to see gone to be dismissed? We don't know. But that's what why we're asking for this amendment. Let me turn to 36 and 37. Amendment number 36 first is a cut which equals to the annual budget for the special assistant remuneration in the CE's office. This is one of the special appointments made by the CE's office. Incidentally, the incumbent is related to Wai-yip. It's been said that the statutory bodies are clubs to accommodate retired senior officials. But it seems that the CE's office is now a club for retired Wai-yip personnel. The annual salary is $1.09 million. I don't think the head of Wai-yip gets such a high pay. And this person is a senior journalist covering political news in Wenhui-bao. It's called Zhang Chunfei. There was a 3-page interview of Mr. C.Y. Leung telling people that Mr. Leung likes to grow vegetables and how he spends his leisure time. It's about image building. It's the work of a spin doctor. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Leung Yiu-chung. Chairman, in my speech yesterday, I centered on the behavior of the CE and the irregularities in his government, and what he did was against public opinion. Therefore, I said I supported the amendments to cut the budget for the CE office. And now I want to turn to other proposed cuts. For example, $1.5 million for overseas visits and $0.7 million for entertainment by the CE. Let me stress that overseas visits paid by the CE are not unimportant, but they must be made depending on the circumstances. We should look at whether such visits are going to be helpful to the government, and they should not be made for their own connection building or for the purpose of helping with his building a future for himself. All chief executives should regulate their behavior under this principle. But for this CE, as well as the last CE, we haven't been shown that they are doing this. On the contrary, they are doing all these to pave their own future. Chairman, the last CE is no longer imposed, and it's not meaningful to pursue his responsibility. The ICAC has been investigating into his misconduct for more than a year and a half, and still nothing has come out of it. But we should not let up our efforts when it comes to the incumbent CE. So what should we do? Chairman, there's no mechanism at present for a close monitoring to be carried out. And such activities by the CE are very intransparent. We don't know where and why he pays such visits. But of course, he has to tell us the expenditure incurred. But we can never tell the achievements or results that we can get from such visits. We should be concerned about such visits. In the past 20-odd months, since Mr. C.Y. Leung took up office, on average, he would be on an overseas visit or visit outside Hong Kong once a month. As some members put it, he's out of Hong Kong more often than he is within Hong Kong. But there's no mechanism for us to monitor such activities. It's never been easy, and we haven't got a mechanism. I very much agree with the proposed cuts to the budget for the CE's overseas visits. If we can cut the budget, then there's no question of abusing the financial provision. I said that he might abuse it because I want to be nice and polite, because it may be a misuse of, and also it may be abuse of the financial resources. sometimes he will visit places which we know little about, and we don't see whether there's any direct or indirect relationship between Hong Kong and those places. Sometimes he spent a lot of money. On one occasion, just the CE himself spent $100,000, and sometimes there was no expenditure incurred. Would such visits be justified if there was no expenditure incurred? On the 21st of March 2013, he went to Samjan. What was the visit about, Chairman? He was in Samjan. Or to join the opening ceremony of Dr. Lam Sun Chiu. It was an eye hospital. Was that necessary? Should he attend the ceremony of an eye hospital himself? I would have thought that it would be more appropriate for Dr. Kwok-wai to attend the ceremony. So it seems that he was indiscriminate about such visits, and there was no proper oversight. And of course, sometimes no expenditure was incurred because some other people were the hosts. I think this time we should give him a warning so that next time he will think twice about the necessity first before making such trips. Chairman, because of a lack of information, it is difficult for us to assess the necessities of such visits. I hope by cutting the budget, we would get some rules laid down by the CE's office so as to prevent any abuse by the CE of public funds for the purpose of paving his own future. And we would be able to avoid a situation whereby we don't know why he pays a visit to certain places. If the government doesn't want us to cut this provision, but because I think next year some colleagues of this council will continue to ask for such cuts. If you want to prevent this, there should be rules or guidelines laid down on deciding whether such trips should be made, and also there should be an account given on the achievements of benefits that we can get out of such visits. We should prevent the CE using such trips for building his own future, for paving his own future. Well, this is important because he's just in office for a short time, and things would get worse in the future, because soon the question of whether he is going to seek a second term will come up. We are concerned that he would continue to build his own connections and relationship with the powerful people, because that's important if he wants to get a second term. So I hope very quickly we can see a set of guidelines or rules laid down on such visits. And after a visit is made, all the details should be made public. Chairman, apart from making so many overseas visits, there's a question of entertaining guests. There are altogether 296 such occasions by the current CE. In the last term, we have 136. For this year alone, we have 160 such occasions, so much higher the figure than the last term of government. Last term, the expenditure was $365,000, but we have to make a provision of $700,000, so that's double the previous budget. entertaining guests are commonplace. We shouldn't have to mention this.
But I have to mention it because the C-Leung is not, C.Y. Leung's not like other CEs. He always, sometimes he may use his position to do something that's nothing to do with his post, but rather it's for himself. He tries to gain favor, he tries to build his network and build connections. Now, C.Y. Leung, when he was the convener of IXCO, he actually asked to use the government house to entertain professionals. I don't know why the government house could be loaned out like that. The government house was then the venue for used by the CE for receiving guests of the government. But then C.Y. Leung actually asked to use the venue then. So there was a lot of criticism in the media. Now he keeps entertaining. Could the entertaining be for building his own network? Now, last time at the government house, he invited professionals to the function. I don't know what that had to do with his official position. Maybe he was just trying to show off, or he was just trying to gain favors, or he was paving way for his own development in future. Maybe now he's trying to pave the way for re-election. And I'm worried that this will get worse. So the $700,000 in the estimate, actually the figure's gone up for entertainment, and I'm really worried. The chief executive earns over $4.2 million a year, and entertainment is $700,000. He could afford it himself entirely. If it's for his own private business, we shouldn't pay for his entertainment with public money. So that's why I would like the $700,000 cut. And the government should also set guidelines on how to spend money like this. Now, I'm not asking for Puritan chief executive, but we don't want CE who spends money recklessly just to pave way for his own future. We want the SL government to be alerted or to be reminded this is public money, it should be spent properly. That's what we're trying to do by cutting the estimate here. So money must not be spent for personal gain. And so through this amendments, we hope we will make the SL government formulate guidelines. So we have a government with probity, and we are able to prevent people from abusing their official position for personal gains. I hope there will be such a system, and it has to be a transparent system. It will be out in the open for all to see. Thank you. Does any other member wish to speak? Mr. Kwok-hung? Mr. Chairman, I wanted to